Hi, welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot, Illinois. I'm Madeleine Doubek, here again with Matt Dietrich. And this week we learned that you can pack a lot of information on an index card.
You certainly can, especially when you have political sponsors who are recommending people for jobs and promotions and generally trying to gain favor for their political allies.
So what we're talking about here is the story that broke this week about Metra and 3 huge boxes full of 700-800 index cards of people who'd been referred by various politicians for jobs at Metra. We had names like Denny Hastert and Henry Hyde and former Governor George Ryan referring people for jobs. We had
Paul Simon
and Dawn Clark-Netsch, who are considered to be good government reformers.
Right. They're sort of the patron saints of good government in Illinois.
And yet they were engaging in patronage.
Mm-hmm. And this really harkens back to a different era in government in Illinois. The note cards span a period from 1983 to 1991 at Metra. It does speak to a time when patronage was practiced openly as part of the hiring process in government. Now, this all changed in 1990 with a Supreme Court case that came out of Illinois, Rutan versus Republican Party of Illinois. Officially now, the hiring process in government has to follow certain steps, and you don't have this favoritism anymore until you get into a certain level of employees that are called Rutan exempt. But that's not the only reason Speaker Madigan has been in the news in the past week.
That's right. He, in 3 weeks' time, this millionaire tax that we talked a lot about with great fanfare and thought was a pretty clever political masterstroke, pretty much came to a dead halt. And a lot of it was due to just a couple of members of his own caucus, one of whom is a freshman by the name of Scott Drury. He's a Highwood Democrat, which is on the north shore of the Chicago metro region. And I talked to him this week about that whole experience of telling the state's most powerful politician no. And he's got some millionaires in his district. That's an affluent district. But the sense was really that this was much more about, we've got to stop this piecemeal approach to our taxes and our spending and our revenue and our budgeting. And, that he felt like we've got a millionaire tax proposal, we've got progressive tax proposals, we've got the 5% rate now that's supposed to drop a little bit by the end of the year, but Governor Quinn wants to make it permanent. If one of my constituents came and asked me what his tax rate was going to be when all the fallout happened, he couldn't answer that question. And there's never discussion of any, what's the spending level going to be, what's the bottom line, what's the whole picture. And so he said, I just couldn't sleep at night, and that's what I told the speaker. So another example of a pretty rare example of someone standing up to the speaker from his own caucus, a freshman no less, and saying no. So that happened, and we've got more of this Metra stuff that involves Madigan. So he's had a few rough months. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next edition of Only in Illinois.